What you doing there?
I'm doing something new.
You're beating a dead horse as usual. That thing still alive.
It's unrelating.
My name's Theo Acosta, and I'll be running your Pilots Federation evaluation. Most pilots assigned to me earn their license, so as long as you follow my instructions, you'll be a commander in no time.
Back in 2014, Elite Dangerous grabbed me, and later I started making dedicated content for it. It became more than I expected. So, analyzing it in this kind of a manner is going to be like breathing your own farts. But you know, I've seen things. Interesting things. And no, I'm not talking about walking in your grandparents having suicide pact orgy kind of a mental scarring thing. Though close enough. However, before we get to take on Elite Dangerous, it's boring time with Space Sims. So, Elite Dangerous is a proud forerunner of Space Sims, but what in the living nightmare that is 2021 are Space Sims in the first place? Is that some kind of a new disease? And how can I avoid it? Answer to all those questions is Latvian class, and lots of it. Since the beginning of computing and first video games, space as a motif was one of the more popular themes. We all dreamed of going out there exploring the void, though mostly due to major incompetence and physical unfitness, basically 99% of the human population can go eat a dick and still not get into space. But what if we could do that from our outcharted armchairs? This is exactly what the modern computing allowed back in early 90s thanks to pioneers in these newfangled computers. So, what exactly are Space Sims? Well, this subgenre was quickly defined by a few different games that came out around the same time, starting with the 1984 Elite, precursor to Elite Dangerous, and Wing Commander in 1990. Both games, unlike previous space-themed games, featured a sort of a cockpit view, like any typical flight-based game of the time, but instead of recreating existing aircraft, the setting and craft used were straight out of science fiction books and movies. From that, the subgenre was more or less solidified. A game about piloting a spaceship with multiple simulator-like qualities like realism, complexity, and/or systems to simulate the world and universe. Thanks to original Elite, this genre would be defined by an open-world style map design as well as some realism hint to it all. While from TIE Fighter and Wing Commander, the emphasis on immersion and storytelling as well as a hint of combat would be added into the mix. Still, if by now you're already bored to tears and ready, in great British fashion, to glass me in the face for boring you, and you need an American-style garbage one-line soundbite, well, Space Sims are like a flight sim games, but in space, with major focus on spaceships and piloting them. There! Happy? The popularity this genre saw right after original Elite released, with Wing Commander and Elite 2 furthering the hype for this kind of a game. However, the lack of publisher support and changing times with the advent of FPS games, the trend of space-related combat or even free-roam games quickly dwindled, and coming to early 2000s, we barely had any decent games to talk about. Sure, there were the German developers Egosoft with their X series, and of course EVE Online, but that one often is discounted. Though EVE has a simulator-like nature, it's not a flight sim in space. So, while the games in the genre did come out, all of them were very niche and, well, let's be frank, barely passable. No one was making those complex games anymore because it was too hard and there was no mainstream promise of success for publishers. And that in turn left the smaller and less experienced creators attempting to fight for scraps. Then, right around the end of 2012, something happened. Two big names came out of what seemingly was retirement to once more wow the crowds. Chris Roberts, seemingly out of coma, comes to amaze everyone in that year's GDC announcing Star Citizen, promising super high fidelity, amazing graphics, and literally anything you ever wanted. You could even literally hear Star Wars fanboys, most of whom were in their 40s and 30s, with loads of disposable cash, just screaming their pants in 10 seconds flat. It was a circus, but if nothing else, Star Citizen has proven that there is a massive thirst for the new age space sim. The other big name was Elite Dangerous with David Braben at the helm. While quite a lot less hyped and modestly presented, as we know today, one of these guys actually achieved what they set out to do, and the other one is furiously masturbating over a massive pile of cash. Both had a cult following and both used crowdfunding to reach their dreams, one more than the other, but still. The new age of space sims was here. Exciting things were happening, and personally speaking, as an outsider looking in, this oddly was marking a new point in gaming for me.
And no, not because that year we finally got after 12 years this monstrosity. No, that one broke my heart.
16th December 2014, 2 years after a large Kickstarter success, Elite Dangerous sees the light of day, and frankly speaking, while I was not there, later seeing some videos of its gameplay, I could not be taken aback by the absolute uniqueness of the game. I truly had never seen anything like it. Now, my background is heavily intertwined with FPS games, which more often than not, short of real sim games, were the most fidelity-full and immersive kinds of games. And frankly speaking, my experience with sim games basically can be summarized in this. Dax,
That day is the sword starts!
However, Elite didn't have those horrifyingly bad controls or visual design that all simulators have. Elite Dangerous actually managed to bridge the gap of complexity without the complicated nonsense that Sims have. Instead, actually implementing user-friendly designs.
Yes, I'm looking at you, Egosoft.
Funny thing is, this ease of use made learning to fly, at least for me, with a fucking keyboard and mouse no less, a breeze. I mean, sure, okay, fine, there was no escaping this. But to this day I still praise the efforts and design of the default key mapping for keyboard and mouse. It was all as I expected it to be, even for a dumbfuck non-sim pleb like myself. However, thanks to a few updates and new features, it seems the developers of Elite have forgotten how to make well-rounded controls, and these days, beyond just flying around, there will be no escaping the options menu, where you will spend months figuring what the fuck does FSS mouse power curve even means. Do I need to see a doctor before or after touching it? Anyhow, after getting used to it, Elite still had tons of little details and information left and right, not to mention fidelity through which you could adjust your ship. Man, I don't think even race sims have this many options. You're lucky if you're allowed to change your seat position. But in Elite, lights on or off. If that's not enough, night vision on or off. Big honkin' horn. Oh, look at that. Did you plug in your garbage Apple Watch to charge and now it's draining your battery? No problem. Disable life support. I mean, who needs it anyways? You can live off your farts anyhow. The intricacies of ship controls were really the rare moments where I knew this is something special. Even to this day, I like to turn on pre-flight checks from time to time, even if it doesn't have any real functionality for gameplay. And the wonderful things didn't end there. Elite as a game is not a super hardcore sim like those racing games or flight sims are. For one, as mentioned, there are actually controls that are intuitive. But more so, Elite doesn't have this medical condition I like to call, "What the fuck were you thinking with this shit, you imbecile?" So let me explain. Have you ever played Arma 2 or hell, even Arma 3? See, these games are technically shooters. They act and feel like normal first-person or third-person shooters do. Until you get to a fucking fence.
Oh, you piece of shit, Arma! We bought for vaulting? Oh, go fuck yourself!
That's basically the illness of simulators. Putting shitty features, ones that wider industry have already solved a decade ago. But no, they refuse to put it in because fuck you, I'm a simulator maker.
Microsoft and Hasbro, you lazy pricks! $60 fucking and you can't make a flight sim with the mouse controls? Oh, fuck you!
So yeah, again, Elite Dangerous developer Frontier truly deserves a high praise for controls. However, here comes a topic that I'm personally none too fond of. But to be fair, I should acknowledge it, even if it resembles a flat earth vegan. The simulator aspects of Elite. Elite as a game can be more described as a space flight arcade rather than a full Newtonian physics simulator. However, Newtonian physics is a shit mechanic, lest you are the most boring person in the world and think otherwise. Ship movement-wise, Frontier had chosen the right approach of making a game, using less realistic mechanics that in reality feel far more real than one-to-one recreation. Still, one of the biggest party pieces for Elite remains its world, or rather, a full fucking galaxy to discover and travel. No, I shit you not, unlike other games, open world or not, there's not 30 systems, there's not even 100, there's not even 1,000 systems. Developers of Elite Dangerous, by using Space Engine and clever procedural coding trickery, offers you a full fucking galaxy of 400 billion systems. And I, being a coder, still am impressed. Every system not only has planets and stuff in them, but also they are moving, not just remaining stuck in place. And that has led to some rather funny, interesting, and unintentional results. Like insane planet generation artifacts, be those intentionally made by using graphics card overclocking or by nature of procedural generation, or maybe the whole system itself. Funny that according to developers, only about 2.3 million systems have ever been visited by players up to this point. That alone should tell you about the potential to exploration, especially because you can put your player's name as to first to discover a planet, map it, or a whole system. Oh, and did I mention that Elite is modeled after our own galaxy? So this will be any astronomy enthusiast's dream. Still, if that does not impress you and you are more of a big fan for EVE Online, basically your veins are made of the spreadsheets and you replace your genitals with the calculator, maybe then the simulator aspect that will thrill you will be the politics and minor or major faction interaction. Full disclosure, Yamiks would rather go work as Bob's back alley speed abortion technician than touch BGS or powerplay. But I do recognize that some people like to see randomly generated name be a little bit higher than some other randomly generated name. So, how much of this so-called background simulation is there in Elite? Frankly, on the first glance, a lot of it is there, but in reality, not that much. However, with exceptions of EVE Online, not a single other space sim existing has this complex of a faction system. It's both great and incredibly sad. See, there are a shit gazillion of small factions. Some even have some player group names. Some have even some YouTuber or streamer names too. Full disclosure, I'm not one of them for multiple obvious reasons. However, all of them are exactly the same. Changes you can make by supporting or fighting against these powers are very minimal and often non-existent. The system in of itself is large, but really doesn't affect anything important and seems to exist just to fake liveliness in Elite's universe. It's almost like putting a highly detailed porcelain mask onto a methed out murder hobo. And similarly, but with slightly more dressing up and effect, is powerplay 2. Same idea, same rules, but instead of supporting a random faction, you support an individual. The feature generally is lacking. But like cockroaches, there are some that actually participate in it. Then what about markets? Surely such a massive game with tens of thousands of stations would have some kind of an economy in the game. Well, yes and no. See, unlike in X4 where markets are fully dynamic and would change according to players' actions, here, well, values do change on weekly basis for the most part, but changes are very minimal. You can't just roll in with your clown posse and tank the price on an item. There are hard limiters, and even then, a single person can't affect much. So with that, the simulation in Elite can be concluded more as a dress-up to fake as much as possible the actual emptiness of the play space. But you know, back when I started, I didn't care, nor do I care to this day. What I enjoyed most was mechanics and actual feeling of the game. And this is where the sound comes in a lot. Elite Dangerous to this day has top-notch sound design both in the music and the sound effects. While it's not the main draw for a lot of people, sound often is what gives the weight and crucial characteristic to ships, guns, your environment, and even the monotony of day to day. I really cannot emphasize how much of a gem Elite Dangerous sound is. Time and time again, the sound department of Frontier Developments has come out swinging for the game, and still remains the only department in the company that I would trust to do their jobs properly. More on that later. Even though over the years my biggest critique about Elite's sound was that no matter where you are or what you do, the music always is tonally the same. It's the deep, dark, empty feeling. And that is my only critique about it, the fact that it's unchanging. But even that can be dismissed easily by a counter-argument. Well, that's what they are going for, isn't it? So yeah, surprisingly, out of all the aspects, sound is the closest to a word perfect you'll get from this game, which moreover serves to propagate another aspect of the game, the immersion! So many buttons, so many things. I wonder, what does this button do? Yeah, well, nothing. Oh well, let's move on then.
Oh man, this is dope. Look, seriously. Uh-oh. What did I press? Oh no! 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 Well, I'm still alive.
Fun times. It's interesting to note that though overall Elite is a game made by some rather old gaming design principles, it manages to squeeze in some industry-leading ones as well, VR being one of the biggest ones. Fact that no matter what controls you use, you can play Elite, almost with your eyes closed. The game takes place also in a seated position, which frankly sounds almost like it's made for VR exclusively. Still, even without it, the sound design and depth of it, the level of fidelity, and paired that with ease of use, creates this immersion that all AAA games could only dream about, yet fail non-stop to get. It's rare, but games like this come out once in a while. In truest non-sarcastic way, Elite is immersive. While I do like to joke around with the immersion this and immersion that, whenever you hear these AAA games and their presenters mention immersion, it's indeed a fake-o marketing garbage, but not for Elite. It's one of the few games where it actually truly transports you into its world. And hey, if you want to completely go blind and numb of the orgasmic immersion, just try VR and HOTAS combo. I would only say that Half-Life Alyx has a better immersive feeling. However, Elite is not a standalone VR game. It's just an add-on, and that's what's so striking about the quality of Elite's experience. A game that came out in 2014 out-immersions all the VR titles. However, there is one thing that it lacked for me, and that was atmosphere. Oh no. When I talk about atmosphere, I refer to perhaps a higher level of immersion, one that you can almost smell every time you touch it. This was the case with games like Stalker back in the day due to similar positives of good environmental sound design as well as visuals that represent the world. If we examine Elite Dangerous graphically, then very quickly everything falls apart. You see, if we defocus our attention from ships, which arguably are pretty and well detailed, the world often is very early 2000s, if you know what I mean. Now, unlike Star Citizen, Elite's developers focused on actually making a game, and actually making it run properly, and actually making it run properly on consoles later. These, what Chris Roberts perceives as quote-unquote limitations, are what actually makes Elite run on basically any computer that still breathes today. I said breathe, not grasp for each breath as if both lungs have been punctured! However, visually that comes at a cost, and though improvements have been made over the last 6 years, Elite is showing its age a lot. Even back in 2014, when at best you could say the graphics were okay. Today though, it's more and more glaring that something must change. And this is the thing, visuals are a very important part of building this quote-unquote atmosphere. If something feels off, the complete feeling just disintegrates, as in the case with Elite. Another aspect that builds this atmosphere is a story, and boy, does Elite not have a story! Yeah, bullshit! Elite has so many books and previous games and so much stuff to read, and there it is! Yes, if you want to turbo nerd this, then go and read the supplementary material. But what I'm talking about here is that Elite, since the start and to this very day, absolutely fucking hates its players. You see, games, paintings, music, all of these art forms can tell something about what creator thinks about you, the audience. Maybe it's love, maybe it's elitist look, maybe it's even contempt for your existence. For more information, I really recommend you go and play through Beginner's Guide, please. Anyways, Elite simply drops you in the game and tells you to fuck off. Not the best way to start, but if you don't like hand-holding, maybe this is best for you. Still, when I say Elite Dangerous hates you, it's because you're dropped in some random place in space and told absolutely nothing. A complete cold shoulder. The game is like a pissed off snooty girlfriend giving you the silent treatment. Basically a turbo bitch. Funny thing is that there is actually some interesting little lore nuggets to have, but developers didn't think that in an interactive medium, they should make, you know, an interactive storytelling! Honestly, do I need to spell it out even more? And then there's the ongoing narrative too. Developers say that player actions would impact the game's lore and story and stuff, and wah! But funny thing is that almost every time players get together to do some kind of event or try to change things, developers' attitudes have been rather appalling or downright patronizing. For more information, I've done a whole massive video on Elite Dangerous history with thru, a man who actually wrote parts of Elite's lore. Safe to say, Elite as a game does not feel like a game that likes you as a player, impacting its massive shitty D&D world building, where 90% is just fluff pieces that cannot be observed in-game. Oh yeah, that also is true. To this day, we get some in-game news articles about some events that happened, but when we go look at the system where it took place in, nothing! Just pointless exercise in meaningless world building by the worst kind of a dungeon master. Saddest thing is that the story is the portion of the game that always gives meaning to the aspects of the game, where this atmosphere grows. Instead, it fizzles out even more. And for their writings, I truly believe they deserve Hugo Award, said TheYamiks in the most sarcastic voice possible. And the deflation continues to spat out fart noises as you look at the multiplayer aspects of the game. Simply put, Elite is a peer-to-peer game, meaning no intermediary servers, it's all dependent on people taking part to share the info with each other. It's great for expandability, that is true, but anyone who has ever played a peer-to-peer game will know, at best, it's passable, and Elite, it's borderline that. Yeah, it works, and when it does, experience of playing with others is pretty okay, but looming shadow of instability and diminishing performance is always around the corner. Now granted, clearly Frontier didn't expect this first online multiplayer Elite game to take off as it did. But here we are, and when it comes to experiencing the game, often it's the netcode that stumbles the hardest. And there is something to be said about their willingness to actually improve it over the years, which is close to zero. Okay, fine, Elite is not atmospheric, but it's still incredibly immersive. I say that myself, but even that topic is often called into question. See, the worst things that can happen to an immersive gameplay is having something that takes you out of it, clearly. Worst cases are game crashes like Star Citizen, or stuttering like Star Citizen, or complete refusal to work like Star Citizen. But for actual games, often this comes in the form of full-screen menus. Oh, but come on, Mix, a few paragraphs ago you just gushed how awesome Elite's UI is that it exists in the game world instead of having it plastered in your face. Well, that is true, until you actually need to accomplish anything within the game. See, Elite is much like EVE Online with the spreadsheet jokes, but instead of that, we have tons and tons of third-party tools. You better get used to alt-tabbing or using your second monitor to look up where to find a thing, how to do a thing, what amounts the thing you need, and more. I've never played a game that needed a constant third-party tool assistance. No, I didn't say nice to have these things. I said need. It actually is a massive necessity to use third-party tools. Forget about doing the fastest or best trade routes or combat stuff. No, you need third-party tools to simply not waste your own time in the first place. That's how severe dependence this game has on its own fan-made tools. And sure, lots of games have modders and toolmakers that help the game. That's natural. They add new things or ease already existing functions for their games. For Elite Dangerous, however, the necessary tools and functions downright do not exist. This dependence on fan-made content is a shining example of a great failure. It shows what the biggest problems actually stem from. I mean, why else would there be several big and beloved trading tools, or even simple little sites to tell you if a fucking station has a dildozer in stock? To know how bad it actually is, all you need is to just look at one time when third-party toolmakers collectively made a protest to get more appropriate support API from developers, and they, just for a day, shut down their tools. Do you know what happened that day? Well, basically this. It was so bad that no one was able to play the game normally. So, you better get ready to bookmark all the important websites, cause hell, developers can't be bothered to give a fuck at all after 6 years. I mean, if there are suckers who make our game playable, why should we do anything, right? Let's just go make some more microtransactions. And indeed, that's what Frontier Developments did. Yes, Elite is a paid game that has microtransactions for cosmetic crap. These days they've even added some Monopoly money currency to confuse customers so that they spend even more and more. So, today's topic is trend chasing. Frontier Developments as a company didn't sit still between 90s and early 2010s. They kept on making smaller and some larger games like...
Wait, what? Oh my god.
Also, lots of amusement park management games, so I can't really claim that they were absent from the industry. However, they were mostly work-for-hire third-rate developer studio. With Elite Dangerous, it was the biggest release, the hottest of the products of the time. The funding was there and everything looked up a lot. With the good release of the game and the whiff of independence came inevitable stupidity of the industry. They, at the time when the season passes were already going out of style, chose to pick two things from their peers: the fucking microtransactions and season passes for future content. Both exploitative and disgusting things that should not exist for paid games. Again, in my time I've ranted plenty about all this and why it's bad and so on and so forth. I'll link a relevant video in the description. However, Frontier started planning their road to publisher stardom at the back of Elite Dangerous and legions of truly dedicated fans, instead of actually working on the game or improving it. Also, from the industry, over the time, Frontier picked up some nasty habits and attempted to implement them in the game, like competitive mode with CQC or live service development. And actually important features like guild system also had a competitive mode as the main feature of it, and they just squeezed it out like a stillborn, not even having the time to squat down before moving on to the next abortion. We'll talk about that next time, but let's return to the game itself, or at least as much as it was on the launch. Back in the day, on release, Elite Dangerous was quoted by a lot of people as the space trucking simulator or inch deep, mile wide, which really seemed to have irked some developers. However, this was an apt and best way to summarize the game. Fact is, Elite Sandbox is one of the most massive things I've ever seen since your mom, with so many places to go, but the depth is, as most people rightfully pointed out, rather shallow. Yes, there are planets, but about 99% of them look and feel the same, and there's even then very little to do on them. There's really very little at all outside of human space to do in the first place. And even when inside the human bubble, these randomly spawned NPC ships, factions with random names, all seem to have very little meaning to them. This is what usually people mean when they say that, well, there's nothing to do in it. Even when you ignore the extreme spread of content, you notice it being rather plain, as if there's missing gameplay. Sure, the foundation and basics are there, but something's missing. All the usual gameplay checkboxes are filled, but beyond that initial wow factor, which granted is super impressive, all there is grind, and lots of it. As a finished game on its own, Elite Dangerous would have been a head above average games, thanks to sublime audio and uniqueness of the game itself, with the biggest issues being the grind, complete lack of story presentation, most of the play space being basically empty, and heavy dependence on hardcore drugs, well, known as third-party tools. But still, I would call it almost a good game, and that's saying a lot. Yet developers didn't want that. Elite was destined for a far worse future. A live service future. So, right, well, big thanks for watching. Oh, no, this is not done yet. The dead horse still has plenty of juices to smack and whack. Though, for now, this is about it. These types of long-form videos could not be possible without the great support of patrons and supporters, other places like YouTube's members and Twitch supporters and so on and so forth. Like these particular great names. So, even with $1 a month, hey, maybe consider becoming a patron and support this kind of a content. As for now, well, onwards to the next part. The setting and Evelyn. Oh yeah.